Hey guys, I'm Red. Thanks for checking out my channel. Today we're going to be talking about doing Steadicam work for live multicam productions. And this requires some different skills from you and different capabilities from the rig. So let's talk about that for a bit. And to start off, let's talk about the camera. So this one looks like a multicam camera, but it isn't. This is an E&G camera, and one of the dead giveaways is that it has a mechanism for recording and a battery, and multicam cameras don't have that. And most importantly, they have the capability of being controlled remotely by an engineer. And they would be controlling the iris and the coloring of the cameras to make sure that they all balance and look exactly the same.
They control this with the Camera Control Unit, or CCU. They can make adjustments during the show without you even knowing it. They also have scopes to make sure everything is correctly calibrated. For that to work, the cameras have a wired connection that comes out of the back of the camera. I use this camera now mostly for YouTube videos, but I did use it originally because it had a similar form factor with way less cost. But most importantly for when I was practicing, a B4 mount lens that allowed me to practice zoom and focus.
There are a lot of differences between live and scripted Steadicam work. One of the big ones being that you're going to be pulling your own focus and controlling your own zoom. And I would not recommend this for cine stuff at all. With the smaller sensors, you're usually on a wide angle lens and you're rarely ever wide open. Your depth of field is much wider and it'll be a lot easier to stay in focus. If you are having difficulty with it, you can always ask the engineer to close down your iris a little bit and give you an even wider depth of field, and that'll make it a lot easier for you.
This is the G-Zoom, and it allows you to control the zoom and focus by moving the controls to your gimbal handle. It has a rocker switch for zooming and a knob for changing focus. The knob here changes the speed of your zoom, and this button you can change to do a few different things in the camera, but I normally make it the microphone button for my intercom. One important thing about live stuff is that you have a backup for everything, and this one is my backup. I also have another G-Zoom modified to work better with the Volt. I wanted the cable to come out of the right side, so to make that change I had the button removed, and in its place have the cables come out of that. There are also a few other changes that allow it to be less likely to hit anything when you're tilting up and down.
You can also use the zoom controller that comes with the lens kit. It's not perfect, you won't have focus control anymore. It's intended to be mounted to a tripod, so it's heavy and large, but it'll get you out of a pinch if you're in some trouble.
If you were wondering why the grip tape doesn't cover the whole handle, well, now you know. These are sized to fit your model perfectly. After attaching to the gimbal, I then wrap any extra cable around the post. Then, plug the cable in from the other end into the lens, and you can use the internal servo to control the zoom function. You may need to use an adapter depending on what the brand is, but that comes with the kit. Next, you need to add on focus control. This is the focus motor assembly from Jimmy Jib. Some lenses exist with internal focus motors, but I have never run into one, so you'll have to add one. It attaches to the lens with this bracket and screws into the lens. Now make sure you have the right gear. It comes with a white gear for Canon lenses attached, but there's also a black gear for Fujinon lenses. I know what you're thinking, what about all the other brands? Well, for this, there's only 2 brands of lenses. And don't forget your backups. I keep one with the black gear already installed, and that way I just change what motor I'm using based on the lens. The motor needs to be powered, and that's what this box does. I install it on one of the front rods on my rig. It's a lot easier to install if you plug in the power cable first. Then the motor slides onto the rod, but don't engage the gears yet. All the cables can be a little confusing, but plug everything into the only spots the cable will fit and you'll be fine. I don't engage the gears because as soon as the motor gets power, it spins to line up with the controller. This could grind a few gears depending on if your lens is near a hard stop or not. I then turn the focus knob on the G-Zoom all the way in one direction, and then rotate the lens in the same direction so that they're both at the same hard stop. You can see the motor has a bit of spring to it. This is so you can engage both gears together with enough force for them to engage properly, but it still has enough space to jump instead of stripping out the gear. So when I place it down, I make sure the spring is doing a little work, but it still has plenty of space to jump. Now make sure everything is working properly. If the focus range is too long for the lens, you can limit it with the power box. You should now have full zoom and focus control on your rig that is slowly looking like you've never heard of cable management. I try to clean it up, but it's going to get worse.
You should also keep a return monitor on your sled. The return is the live cut version of the show that is going out live or live to tape. This is important for seeing what the other cameras are doing so that you can do something else and give the director some options on what to cut to. It also lets you see any overlaid graphics that are in the image, and you can readjust framing for that, say if a lower third is cutting off someone's face or something like that.
The first step of attaching your return monitor is to disconnect your monitor bracket from the sled and slide on your return monitor bracket. This is the one from Tiffen, and it converts to a low mode bracket, which is very convenient, but you could probably make something for a lot less money. I then attach a second monitor to it. I like it to be a 5-inch monitor, so it's a little smaller than my normal monitor. It's not something I really watch, more like something I glance at occasionally. Slide the posts back on your rig, and now you want to find a good spot for it. I like it to be right below my main monitor, but I don't want it to get in the way of me using the yoke, in case I decide to tilt the main monitor at some point in the show. Try to choose a good spot though, since it isn't on a yoke, you won't be able to move it without rebalancing at least a little. And then plug it in through one of the other SDI lines that run through your post. And then plug it into the EXT BNC output on the camera. Oh, this camera doesn't have one. How about here? Timecode in? That's close enough. You may also need to go inside the camera menu and make sure it's outputting the correct source. The correct port might also be on the wireless transmitter. Now, hopefully you should see everything working. This is dependent on the switcher being configured correctly, and that they are outputting the correct source too. But they may still be setting it up because they got distracted by a cute cat.
If you're lucky and they give you a wireless transmitter, you might be able to start balancing now. They usually go on the back here or on top. The mounting is different based on whatever model they give you. But they provide that stuff anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The problem is they're much more difficult to use and much more expensive than a Teradek.
They also drain batteries faster than your girlfriend's vibrator, so most shows, especially when you're starting out, will avoid them altogether. Remember that CCU cable connection from before? Well, you're going to have to deal with that now. This cable will be making a lot of the panning and going Dutch decisions for you, all while making you feel like you're being trapped in a net all day. This is one of the types used, and it's called the Triax cable. It is a little older, but is still used today. But this is not the cable they will give you when you arrive to the show. The ones they provide are very thick and not very flexible. So I use a small, thin jumper cable to get from that cable to the camera. This way, the cable will have the least amount of influence on the rig as possible, but with a massive trade-off in durability. The other type I more commonly see is the SMPTE fiber cable. This is also a jumper and is used in the same way as the other jumper. But this one is even more delicate and expensive. It is glass after all, so I would definitely have a backup. I want it to run as close to the post as possible to cause the least amount of influence, and also not have too much weight on it to possibly damage it. So I run it through the camera's top handle and around to the left, where I would plug it into the back. We will just pretend that I connected it, nobody can tell. You also want to connect these two rubber covers together. It will keep dust out of them and out of your connectors. I then tape the cable to the camera so it stays near the post. This should be loose and have a lot of slack. I then run the cable over my right shoulder and down the back of my vest, where I connect it with the cable the show provided. I'm using the jumper here to simulate it. I also make sure I have enough cable so that I can sit the vest on the floor without having the cable strained, in case I need to dock quickly and run to the bathroom. I tape just the jumper portion to the back of my vest. I would normally use more tape than that, but this isn't show supplied gaff tape, so I'm going to do it light. Be sure to connect the two rubber bits to keep out the dust. Then, after taping the show supplied cable to the carabiner, I can clip it to the back of my vest. This way, if someone steps on my cable as I'm walking, all the stress will be passed onto the carabiner instead of the delicate connection point. It will also give you the fun jolt of excitement a dog feels when he hits the end of his leash. I do it this way because some shows will have different cables you need to plug into at different parts of the show. Maybe one is on stage and the other one is backstage for a long hallway entrance shot. All my assistant has to do is disconnect the covers, disconnect the cable, and undo the carabiner, and we're off to the other cable that is already set up in that same way. One negative about the jumpers is they don't transmit power to the camera anymore like the normal cables do. You'll have to power it off your sled with a 4-pin XLR cable. I would be able to power this camera off the sled too if I hadn't damaged the input a few years ago. Once you power it up, make sure you have image on your monitor and that you're getting your return and that your intercom works. Oh yeah, right.
The intercom is important for communication with the director, mostly listening, but it's also great for talking shit with the other camera operators. Whenever I'm doing a show, I always ask for a wireless intercom. That way I can just let the audio guys deal with it, and I can connect it to my vest here, and it's super easy to do. But a lot of shows don't have it or they don't want to deal with it, so they'll want to run the intercom through the camera, and now it's your problem.
This is the 5-pin XLR, and it is the connection to the camera from the headset. This is the headset that I use. It has a bendable microphone I can put anywhere, and custom in-ear headphones. I normally only put one of the headphones in so that I can hear what's going on around me, but I'll put both in if I'm shooting something loud like a concert. There are lots of different kinds of headsets, and it's just a personal preference which one you get. There's also nothing wrong with using the ones that normally come with the camera kit. Although the cable is not very flexible, you might want to look into a jumper for it. If that exists, I don't know. I run this cable exactly the same as I run the jumper, through the handle and right into the back. Well, this doesn't have one. I'll just tape it here, nobody can tell, it's fine. And then I tape it down to keep it as close to the post as possible. I'm reusing the tape because I care about the environment, not because I'm cheap.
Now that that's set up, it's time to set up the tally light. This red light lets you know that your camera has been selected by the director and you are live. Even though they usually warn you that you are going to be live, sometimes accidents happen, and it's most important to know right away when that does. You don't want to make you or the director look stupid when that happens.
The camera already has a tally light or two, but they are in inconvenient spots. So we need to move it from this location to something a little more useful. Depending on what rig you have, this will be different, but these are the cables that I have and they're basically the same. One end of the cable is a small light sensor. This is a simple way to tell if the tally light is on or not. On the other end there are some small LED lights that you can put where you would like. They light up when the sensor sees light. And in the middle of the cable a 4-pin LMO that gives the cables power, and I think some simple electronics to make it work. There are other cables out there that have multiple LED sides, so you can put them in multiple locations, and also ones that allow you to run it through an unused SDI cable already run through the post, but I don't have them. I'll just add it to my never-ending list of things to get. To hook up the cable, line up the light sensor with the tally light and tape it on. I do my best to make sure it only receives light from the tally and no external light bleeds in. There's nothing scarier and more confusing than a false tally going on and off. The 4-pin LMO plugs into the nose box on the front of the top stage in a port marked tally. The LED end should now light up when the on-camera tally lights up. On this camera, it shows when I hit record, but you would have to ask the director to cut back and forth between your camera and another one to test it. If the tally on the camera is working correctly but your sensor is not picking it up, or it's too easily activated, there's an adjustment under the nose box, under everything here. I realized around now I could have just unscrewed the volt box without undoing everything, but oh well, I already did it. Turn the dial with a small flathead screwdriver to get the correct sensitivity. Now that it's working, you can place the LED wherever you need it. Most commonly, it goes under the monitor. But sometimes the talent wants to know when they're live, so I would put the tally above the lens so they can keep an eye on it as they look at the lens. And with that often goes a teleprompter, so talent can be able to read their lines while they're looking into the lens. The teleprompter is one of my favorite upsell items. It normally rents for an additional $100 a day, and mine were $100 brand new. I recommend getting the cheapest monitor you can get. It should be pretty bright and really light, but you can skip out on the 4K HDR monitor. You will also need a way to attach it to the camera. There are a lot of better ways to do this than the way that I do it, but this is what I have. Then you would plug it into the prompter BNC on the back of the camera, and I power it up with the D-tap. I don't have a way of showing you what it would look like, but with the power of post-production, I can simulate it. Believe it or not, this is actually an effect. There are a lot of other parts that I don't have that are commonly used too. Multiple docks so you can dock in different locations, a Moses pole, on-camera lighting. Now that everything's set up, you can balance as normal. I like to wear my intercom in my vest when I'm balancing like this. It keeps me from getting knotted up in the cables and also puts about the same amount of influence on the gimbal as it would when I'm using it. One issue you'll find when balancing is you can't spin the rig to get dynamic balance like you're used to. To compensate for this, I spin the rig about a quarter turn quickly to try to see how it looks. If anyone has figured out how to get perfect dynamic balance with cables attached, please let me know.
So now that the rig's ready to go, you probably have a lot of time on your hands because you're going to be waiting for rehearsals to start or the show to start or something. So why don't you use the time wisely and check out my Instagram at SteadiRed and check out some of these other videos while you have the time. And please like, comment, and subscribe to them because it helps me out a lot. It is still fun to play with. These damn cables, I hate these things.